Hey y'all, welcome back to Poplar Creek Farm. Today we are going to break down how much we actually made in 2021 and how much we spent in 2021. 2021 was our first year as a farm business, our first year doing craft fairs, our first year doing markets. So this was a big year for us because it was kind of, can we actually do this? But I also had the kind of expectation that I wasn't going to necessarily make a profit my first year. And boy, did I not. But it's okay. So let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to break everything down. Obviously, doing my taxes recently, I've had to break everything down, so I figured this was kind of a good time to do this video. Let's first talk about total sales for the year. Now, this is everything. This also includes some of my uncle's sales because he sells his products under my, basically like we wholesale them in a sense. So this is everything. All of our farmers markets, which we did 3 farmers markets. We did the Oneida County Public Market on Saturdays. On Mondays, we did the Whitesboro Farmers Market. And on Tuesdays, we did the New Hartford Farmers Market. We also did a couple craft fairs. We did Madison County Craft Fair. We did Apple Fest. And we did a couple other little ones in the spring. But nothing major. Apple Fest and Madison County were big for us. So drum roll. Total sales in 2021 were $10,716. Woohoo! For our first year, though, that was pretty good, and we were pretty happy with that. That includes our meat chickens, that includes our soap sales, honey sales, everything that we've done. So, now let's get into the costs. Okay, this is where it gets a little tricky. So first of all, we have to have insurance, even to apply for craft fairs or for farmers markets, not craft fairs necessarily, but farmers markets, we have to have liability insurance, right? It's just a requirement and, a pretty smart one to have. So that is around $500 for the year. And these numbers I'm going to give you guys kind of like estimates, kind of rounded numbers. So yeah, around $500 a year. Then let's get into our soaps. So soaps is a lot of expenses initially because you have to buy all your molds, you have to buy all the equipment, the safety equipment, your mixers, which I went through 3 mixers this year. Now I have a KitchenAid one, and so far so good. Knock on some big wood, because I don't want another one to break. It's very frustrating when those break. But obviously the thing that is going to be continuous is the actual oils and fragrances. And I have fragrances downstairs that I've never actually even used this year, just because I purchased them, people requested them, and I just never got around to making them. So I have a lot of fragrances that I have going forward that I can use. So some of these expenses will carry over into the future. I still am not out of any oils right now. I'm doing pretty well on those. But in 2021, I spent around a little over $3,000 on oils and fragrances, and that's mostly from Wholesale Supply Plus and Brambleberry. Those were the 2 places that I ordered from the most. Then molds, safety equipment. Some of this is actually the lard because of the way I order it. It's on a separate thing. Labeling, which includes my Cricut and all the things you need for a Cricut, was about $3,400 spent. Then let's get into our laying hens. The hens themselves, so the chicks that we ordered, were $157. We spent so far about $400 on their feed. Brooding supplies. Now we use the brooding supplies for the laying hens, but also for the meat chickens. Was around $170, and that was not the totes the big metal feed troughs pretty much that we use for the brooders. This was just the heat plates that we ordered because we got the barrels somewhere else, and I don't think we have the receipt for them. So that was another probably $300. But then feed supplies, so any kind of buckets, anything like that. We also had some supplements, things like oyster shells, and that was around $180. Then the meat chickens, obviously the chicks themselves. Now this is taking away for what we use because we do eat our chickens, obviously. So we did, for tax purposes, we had to take away what we actually use for ourselves. So the chicks themselves cost about $430. It was actually a bit more than that. It was probably closer to, I think it was closer to 500. But again, taking away for what we actually consume. Feed for them was about $800. And it's hard because we did lose so many at different times this year, that we had a lot of feed, and some of this feed would carry over to the laying hens too, but it's kind of hard. We have to just draw a line and put it on one side or the other, because we had like starter feed and things. But we had feed and we were feeding them, and then we had some chickens die. And so you put a lot more feed sometimes than what you actually end up, coming out with. And then packaging for our meat chickens, so our shrink wrap bags, as well as our labels, was another $150. And then bees. Let's get into the bees, which is one of the biggest expenses that we have on our farm. The fencing, I had to buy a new battery for our Premier One solar battery pack, and that was $54. I think basically the guy said that they can die when they get really, really cold for a long period of time. And we did leave it out a little bit longer than we should have last year in the winter. I did bring it in eventually, but it was already had snow on it. So I didn't do that this year. I brought it in early. Basically by the time the bears are hibernating, then I'm not so worried about having the electric fence on. The fencing itself stays out there just because it's at least some kind of barrier. But we don't have the solar box out there, so I'm hoping we don't have any issues with that again. Hive equipment, this was about $2,800. This is my boxes, my supers. Now I expanded quite a bit. I went from 4 hives to 10. I bought enough for 10 hives, so I bought 6 more hives, where we have 8 hives currently, probably less than that because of my issue that we had with them getting knocked over, but so I have a good amount of boxes still. I have 2 full hives ready that I can use, and if at least one of those other ones dies, I'll have that, and we'll use that for now, and then we'll expand some more next year. Honey equipment, so honey bottles, honey labels, kind of the uncapping stuff, things like that I needed. That was about $700. And then bee feed was $460, and that was pollen patties, sugar bricks, and I have a ton of them left over. Like I still have enough probably for this entire year. So that I bought more than I needed last year. I just bought a lot, and then like I said, I have a ton. I didn't even get into one of the boxes of the fondant, and I don't think I even got into one of the boxes of the pollen patties. So I have plenty left over, and that'll be my spring feed. So I won't need that again. Produce. Now I bought a good amount of my seeds in 2020, so a lot of this doesn't actually show all of my seeds that I purchased last year, but this does include garlic for this year, and I purchased almost $300 worth of garlic, so that's why this is actually as high as it is, without actually having a lot of my seeds. So my seeds, most of them were from Baker Creek, but some from Johnny Selected, and the garlic was from Fruition, and that was $720. Then soil amendments. This is things that I bought. So this is my fish emulsion. I have biochar that I bought last year for this year, so this includes that. Also, I included in this my neem oil, my diatomaceous earth, things like that, and that was about $300. Frost protection, so that frost fabric that goes on top of the rows, which is really, really necessary when we sometimes get those really late frosts that you don't expect, and that was about $130. And then my produce packaging, so the packaging I bring to the market, I get the green produce little square containers, and that was about $50. Ordered a pack of 200. And unfortunately, my produce didn't do super well this year, not at the market itself. When I did bring stuff, I sold them. It actually was more of the fact that we had such a wet season, and I was so over my head busy that I had a hard time keeping up with it, because the days that I was off, it would be raining, and then the days I had work, it was sunny, and so I couldn't get out there because I was working. It was just, so hoping for a much better year with produce. Now a couple other big purchases were a tiller. We got a new tiller. So we had purchased a tiller previously, and then it broke after just a couple uses. So we went ahead, and the company was fortunate, was kind enough to return it for us. So we were very fortunate with that. although again, it wasn't really our fault. It broke after just a few uses, which is not good. But it was about $3,200 for a new tiller. That will last us years and years and years. And again, we are trying to get away from tilling at some point, and if we do get away from it, we will sell that. But until then, that was a big purchase. And then we purchased a trailer. The trailer is intended for multi-use. We need to put hay on it. We need to put feed on it. I can go now finally pick up my beekeeping supplies and not having to pay shipping. But shipping on beekeeping supplies is normally like, a lot of times it's like $60-$70 because it's big stuff. And where I get my beekeeping supplies is only about, their factory's only about 2 hours from here, and they can put it on with a forklift, put it on the pallet, or they have a pallet of it and put it on the trailer, and it'll be easy. I didn't want to do it with the truck because driving 2 hours with, potentially like 1,000 pounds in the back of the truck is kind of pushing it. But with the trailer, that could tow that no problem. So that was about $4,000 for that. And then craft fair and market fees. So we paid for a full year of the Oneida County Market, which is still ongoing. So I don't have to pay again until May. Well, that's when the new one starts. I'll have to pay, before then. We paid for a full year. We did the Whitesboro Market. We did the New Hartford Market. And then we did those two big craft fairs, and craft fairs are pretty expensive, for a weekend, although you do make that money back. But that was about $1,000. So total expenses were about $22,000. And that's not including anything that we can't actually write off. So things like we have a tractor. We pay our monthly fee for a tractor. Obviously, we pay, the loan monthly. We could write it off if we had interest, but it is a 0% interest loan for the New Holland does that every so often. They do 0% interest on their tractors, and which is great. But I'm like, man, I can't write that off. But we do have that, and we pay that monthly. And so, there's other expenses, and there's things that, again, we forget to write off. This was my first year with a business, and I am not the most business-minded person. It's not that I can do all the things. I can do all the farming. It's the remembering to keep receipts and writing things down and keeping track of all that stuff that I'm not so spectacular at, but I'm getting better. So these are things that I have receipts for. These are things that I know I have documentation of, because if we were to somehow, get audited, which could happen at any point, we want to make sure that we have our purchases in writing, not just saying, oh yeah, we remember we purchased this, and writing it down. So there's potential for more costs, unfortunately. So we spent $22,000 and made $10,000. So obviously we had quite a loss, but I'm not surprised. This is kind of expected with a new business, and I do think we will turn it around. We're doing a lot more craft fairs this year, which craft fairs bring in a lot more money initially. So we'll hopefully have a lot more profit coming in, and our expenses should be down. Soaps, I really don't need to buy anything other than some oils and fragrances as I run out. I shouldn't need more molds. I shouldn't need anything else with that. We've got our laying hens. We'll just need feed for them and the packaging for their eggs, which I have a bunch of egg cartons still that are brand new egg cartons. We'll need bedding for them, but beyond that, there's not really a whole lot. The meat chickens we're going to do more of this year, so that really won't change anything. We have a good amount of packaging left from last year, so we'll be able to use that, but we'll still need more. The bees are probably the biggest thing. Bees and produce are the biggest thing I'm expanding on this year. Obviously the pigs as well, but expanding from last year. Bees, we'll get a couple more hives. It'll really depend. I'm going to probably order 5 more hives because, again, I have 2 empty ones. My parents are going to buy 1 or 2 actual hive boxes, and I'll put the bees in them and take care of them. But we'll see. It'll probably be around 5 that I'll buy, but if I need more, I will purchase more, because beekeeping has been a huge, that's probably been one of my biggest sellers, is my honey and my honey products, and stores want that, and I need to produce more. Produce, seeds, that's just the biggest thing, is seeds, and I am doing more seeds this year, but my ordering probably will be about the same as last year, maybe a little bit more, but it's more production based. And so I think it'll be very similar, and it'll be not a huge expansion on that. The biggest thing is we're going to, get some compost that we'll be able to put down, and then fencing that we'll need to write off as well, because we do need to expand on fencing. Otherwise, pigs are the next biggest thing, and that's we were working on their pig hutches now, and then we'll need electric fencing and some actual stationary fencing for them, and feed, and that's about it for them. But we'll keep track of things a little bit better this year so that I have better documentation, and so I can show you guys a little bit better picture next year. But so at the end of the day, about a $12,000 loss this year. But am I surprised? No, not really. And once I get to a certain point with bees, I'm hoping next year actually that I can start selling some nukes. So I won't be expanding as quickly, because there's a certain point where I can't double every year. Or I will just overwhelm myself, and I can't do that. So we'll hopefully rein it in a little bit. And the reason we can still do this, even with having a $12,000 loss, is the fact that my husband and I both still work. My husband works full time. He busts his butt. I mean, he works overtime. He's been working a ton. I work per diem as a nurse. I work per diem so that I can have the flexibility to be home with my kids as much as I possibly can, so we don't have to have daycare expenses. That's huge for us. But we could not afford this. We could not do this without having both of our incomes currently. So that's the breakdown for 2021. Hopefully 2022 will be a lot better of a year. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Remember, we're growing today for a better tomorrow. Please like and subscribe, and join me on the next one.